Hello everyone. Okay, so this podcast forms part of the feedback to your first Section A question that I marked and returned to you. The question that you did is on the first page there, so I'm not going to read through the actual source with you, but just to remind you of the question. It says, assess the value of the source for revealing how far Germany was unified and the reaction to the unification in 1871. So just a reminder to you that there are two main parts, two historical inquiries within that question. There's the first one, and the reaction to the unification is the second one. So you asked how far Germany was unified, the reaction to the unification. So there's two parts. And then within each of those parts, you're asked to do three things. You're asked to explain your answer using the source. That's the first one, A. You're asked to explain your answer using the provenance, the information given about its origins, its nature, its purpose, the context, the time it was written, etc. So that's the second one. And thirdly, you're asked to use your own knowledge about the historical context. And though it doesn't say precise, always think really precise knowledge and try to think to yourself knowledge that is not actually in the textbook. Okay, so that's the third part. So there, in a sense, is a kind of ready-made plan. There's 6 elements to the question. There's part 1, A, B, C, part 2, A, B, C. Okay, we've already talked through that in class. The purpose of this podcast, though, is to exemplify to you a couple of paragraphs which I've written myself to give you a model to exemplify how you can use your precise own knowledge to make the inferences, which is the part A there, explain your answer using the source, that's the inference bit, but also using your precise own knowledge to evaluate the provenance of the source, which is the second bit there, the information given about its origin. So I'm not going to read through the source with you. We'll just scroll down and go to the second page. Bear with me, there it is. Okay. So what you can see here, I'll just pull back a little bit so you can see the big picture. I've written 2 paragraphs. Okay, this is not the whole answer. I've just written for you 2 paragraphs that exemplify how to make inferences using precise own knowledge and how to use precise own knowledge to evaluate provenance. And as you can see, alongside the 2 paragraphs, I've put lots of annotations that take you through the steps and why that is a well constructed couple of paragraphs. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to read through the 2 paragraphs with you, and you can obviously cross-reference as we go through to the annotations. So let's just go through. Okay. So the source is very valuable in helping to understand the socialist reaction to the unification of Germany in 1871. Notice how the paragraph clearly links to the question, okay? Because you're being asked about the value of the source. So you start the paragraph with a very clear statement. It is very valuable in helping us as historians. What does it help us understand? Okay, well, it helps us understand how the socialists reacted to the unification. Okay, so we're going to develop that point now. So you clearly link the paragraph to the question. Now the next bit is useful. August Bebel was, along with Wilhelm Liebknecht, the co-founder of the Social Democratic Workers' Party at the Eisenach Conference in 1869. Now notice how there you're developing a point about the provenance of the source. You're told in the question that the source was written by August Bebel, and you're clearly told that he was a socialist. But what you're doing here is you're showing the examiner you've got really good, precise own knowledge. Okay, so you're adding information. You're saying about Liebknecht. You're saying that he was a co-founder. You're mentioning the name of the party, the Democratic Workers' Party, and you're saying that in 1869 at the Eisenach conference, that was when the party was founded. So you're really focusing in on the provenance of the source. Remember, the provenance is the information you're given about the origins of the source, and you're adding to that using your own knowledge. Okay, so let's move on. In source A, Babel is addressing party members. He refers to the way that the small states play policy bailiff to Prussia, and how Prussia is using its absolutist militarist appetite to remove the political freedoms of the smaller states. Okay, so what you've done there is you have extracted a couple of quotes from the source, which is evidence. And the next bit is the important bit, not because that's a low-level skill. Anybody can copy a couple of lines from the source, but what you've got to do is show that you understand the value of that evidence, and this is the inference bit. Okay, now there are certain phrases you can put in which show that you're making an inference, because the examiner needs to see that you're making inferences. Okay, and one way is to use the word suggests. Clearly, the source suggests that. Okay, so I now know an inference is on its way. It suggests that Babel was opposed to the extension of Prussia's powers as a result of the unification of 1871. So there's the inference. You're showing the examiner you understand the source. Okay, all well and good so far. Okay, that's still a fairly low-level skill. You're clocking at marks here. Okay, but you've then got to move to the most important bit of all. You've got to basically apply your precise own knowledge to that inference. Okay, so this is the most important part of the answer. You've made an inference, you've extracted a piece of evidence, you've said what the source suggests, but you've now got to use your knowledge to what we call substantiate the inference. Now, substantiate basically means, is the inference reliable? Can you trust it? Okay, it suggests that Babel was opposed to the extension of Prussia's power. Well, okay, just because it suggests that, does that mean, is that of value to you? Okay, now you can go two directions here. You can either disagree and you can say, from my own knowledge, I think this is a load of rubbish. You wouldn't say it in that way, okay, but you would say, from my own knowledge, Babel's exaggerating the truth or whatever. Or you can agree with it and you can say, from my own knowledge, I think this is pretty accurate. Now, in this particular instance, you're saying, yes, that this is actually very accurate. Okay, so there's the key phrase. Okay, you're being asked to evaluate. Use phrases like that. This is a very accurate depiction of Babel's views. And here's the own knowledge. He was a fierce internationalist. Okay, you're putting your own knowledge in here. Indeed, as the only socialist member of the Reichstag, there's really precise own knowledge. There was only one socialist in the Reichstag that was elected in 1871. Babel used this position in 1871 to protest against the annexation of Alsace-Lorraine. Now, that's not told, you're not given that information in the source, but you're applying your own knowledge here, okay, to substantiate the inference. That provoked Bismarck's hostility. Very good own knowledge here. So Bismarck, the first Chancellor of Germany, okay, stated, this is A-level, you've got to show your knowledge. Bismarck resented Babel and his fellow socialists, whom he saw as traitors because their internationalism was weakening the newly unified German Empire. And then notice here how the paragraph ends strongly. It revisits that point. It just reminds the examiner that you're focused, because you're being asked to assess the value of the source. The source is therefore also valuable because it helps historians. That's what value is about. It's value to historians. It helps historians understand the reasons why Bismarck attacked German socialists and why he passed his anti-socialist laws later in the decade in 1878. So again, very good precise own knowledge there, and you're saying, look, from this source, it's helping me understand something that happened later on. Therefore, the source is of value to me. So you're applying precise own knowledge to understand later value. Let's have a look at the second paragraph, okay, and very similar approach, the notes along the side, okay. So, as well as helping historians understand the reasons for the socialist opposition to the German unification and Bismarck's reaction to the political left wing, Source A is also valuable in showing the growing unity within the German socialist movement after 1871. Now notice here how that's a very good linking paragraph. The first part of that sentence links back to the previous paragraph because it reminds you, or reminds me as the reader, what the previous paragraph did, but it then follows through. It's also valuable, so it's clearly introducing a new point. So this paragraph is going to be about how the source is valuable because it shows the growing unity within the German socialist movement. The source infers that. There's the clear flag, the sign in the paragraph that you're making an inference. Now, notice how you vary the words a little bit. In the previous paragraph, it uses the phrase "the source suggests that." Here, you say the source infers that. You've got to vary your language a little bit, but nevertheless, it's making it clear you're making an inference. It infers that Bebel's speech to the party members has plenty of support. Okay, so where's the evidence? Remember, you've always got to back up an inference with evidence. He is clearly enjoying his presentation, mocking Prussia when he says, "God forbid, gentlemen," which prompts laughter. That is referenced on 2 occasions in the source. So very, very precise evidence to back up the inference. But remember, okay, that's good to a point. That's a GCSE, that's a grade A star GCSE skill. But this is A-level. You've now got to move beyond just making an inference. You've got to apply precise own knowledge to substantiate that inference. Okay, so notice what now happens. The events from this time and subsequent events show that this is an accurate depiction. Okay, so once again, you're helping yourself by making it very clear in your language that what you're doing here. You're saying to the examiner, look, the question has told me to use my own knowledge, and I'm doing it. Okay, let's see how precise the own knowledge is. Prior to the 1871 unification, the Social Democratic Party had been divided. On the one hand, the Eisenach group, of whom Bebel was the leader, were dedicated revolutionaries who denied the possibility of achieving socialism by parliamentary means. Okay, well, there's a nice little way you can incorporate a quote from a secondary source, William Carr. On the other hand, the Lassallians believed that the social questions could only be dealt with in a gradualist, reformist way, working within the democratic system. Notice how you're using the precise vocabulary of A-level history of this topic. Okay, I'll keep emphasising that point. You've got to use the vocabulary gradualist, reformist, democratic. You've talked about the Eisenach group, the Lassallians. So the rivalry between the Eisenachers and the Lassallians had been bitter, but 1871 marked a turning point. There's again a very good historical phrase about change, in which the rivalry started to be healed, as is clearly suggested in source A. So again, we've got an inference, revisiting the skills that the Marx scheme is looking for, culminating 4 years later in 1875, when the Eisenachers and the Lassallians formally united at the Gotha Conference to form the German Social Democratic Party. Notice how very, very precise that own knowledge is. And then at the end, just to pull it all together, as the previous paragraph did, you've got an end sentence that just reminds the examiner that you're focusing on that question, and it reminds the examiner of what you've just done in that paragraph. Source A is therefore valuable because it helps us understand how Bebel was able to use the events of the German unification to help heal the internal divisions within the German socialist movement. So what we've done there, of course, is we've used precise own knowledge not just to substantiate the inference, but you've used precise own knowledge to evaluate the provenance of the source. You've said you've developed a point about Babel's motives, and that makes it useful. We've learned something about Babel and about what made him tick, and how he used the German unification to create party unity. So even though what he says in the source might not be accurate, nevertheless this is incredibly useful because it's helping us understand something. Now that's only part of the answer. My next paragraph, which I haven't written, but my next paragraph would then start talking about the potential weaknesses of the source. It would move into the issue about bias, about the fact that Babel is only referring to is exaggerating the opposition to Prussian dominance. It makes no mention of the national liberals and the middle class support for unification, etc., etc. But that's another paragraph. I've only written 2 paragraphs here to demonstrate the point. I hope that's useful to you. Okay, try to use that model, the model that I've written there. Try to use that in your next attempt at a Section A question. Thank you.